Let's go ahead and give our guest a call.
Hi.
Hi, is this Bruce?
Yes.
All right, well, let me do the official introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very excited to welcome our featured guest for this evening. He is an actor, he is a teacher, and he even is a producer, if you consider his son, who he produced and gave us for the entertainment field. We're very excited to welcome the one and only Mr. Bruce Glover. You're on the air with Terry and Tiffany. Welcome.
Hi, Tiffany.
I'd like to say it's not only a pleasure to have one of my favorite actors on the show, but somebody who is from my hometown back in the Illinois area. You're from Chicago.
You bet.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, tough city, and it's part of the reason why I've been able to develop the ability to be in a very tough business.
Yeah.
And also a certain amount of talent. Not everyone can go into this business. It's a very dangerous thing to try to become an actor, and people get taken advantage of, and they deal in their own fantasies of what it should be and not getting what it should be. And one of the things that I had was, as a kid, I started working when I was 6 years old. I made 10 cents a day for 6 days, delivering groceries. And I never didn't have a job. My father brought me down to the Loop in Chicago, and I did deliveries for him in areas that were scary for a 7-year-old kid.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I would, get on trains and elevated and all of that stuff and be all over. And then I got a job down the street from my father's jewelry store. He was really a watch repairer. At a newsstand, and I made $1 a day, so I was getting rich. Yeah.
And for all of that, you had to freeze in the wintertime and roast in the summertime.
Chicago is the greatest city in the world except for the weather. There's like 6 good weather weeks in the whole year. You never know when they're going to happen, and being on the newsstand in the winter was you're lifting bundles of papers, and you're trying to stay warm, and sometimes I would sneak into the drugstore where I could look out the window at the newsstand to see that nobody was stealing newspapers.
Go ahead.
I was in the news on that newsstand all the way during the Second World War, and so I survived basically the sadness of everyone being out of work and the war starting. But I always worked, and I didn't not enjoy it. Strangely, I think you need to enjoy whatever you're doing. Find something that you can do. Just enjoying your own ability to handle a new task, whether I'm gardening or mowing lawn or putting up windows or digging graves. I did all of those things.
You dug graves?
Yeah, I dug graves.
Wow.
And I worked with my grandfather, who was a Swedish carpenter, and worked with him with remodeling, and I dug ditches, and I did everything. And but I had an ability for art and an ability for sports. I was a good active kind of dude. And those were the things that kind of kept me going. But in that neighborhood that I was in, I don't know how... I'm older than you are, so it was an entirely different environment. My environment was a tough guy neighborhood. And if you didn't look like a tough guy, you were in trouble. So I remember my mother would dress me in knickers, and as soon as I left the house, I would pull the knickers down to my ankles. And then I would dress in such a way that I looked like a tough guy. Yeah. And I learned to talk like tough guys did. So we all had these, dems, and those accent. If you didn't talk like that, you weren't a tough guy.
So you had to be one of the East Side kids, one of the Bowery boys.
Well, it was different in Chicago. I mean, I was in northwest side of Chicago, and I went to Schurz High, and I played football on their team, and we took the city championship in 1949, and
wow.
I was one of the on that team, and that really contributed to that championship. We played in Soldier Field in front of 100,000 people, which was extraordinary for those times.
Well, even in the 70s, I remember we went to an Elvis Presley concert, and we got lost, and we wound up in the wrong side of town, and the police escorted us out because they said, "You're going to die if you stay here." So it was rough, yeah.
Well, it was a lot of times, there still was some of it. There was that division of black and white, and the south side was considered the black side, and the white was the north side. But as a kid, I remember having to make deliveries into all black areas, and it was an education. I remember getting on a streetcar and heading south on it on State Street, and as the couple of blocks, there were no white people left on the streetcar. It was just blacks, and I was the only white person there, a little 8-year-old kid. And the kindest it got was they didn't look at me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The ones who looked at me with pure hatred, and I understood it because I could understand now what it must have felt sometimes for blacks coming into a white neighborhood.
Right.
So I always had a good rapport with. I remember there was a black coal delivery guy who used to deliver coal, who was, and I remember being able to make jokes with him. And the first time I ever saw him was like 3 years old. I remember running at him, going, "Look, Mom, a black man!" And he laughed and put out his hands, and we had. But that same man, I eventually worked with him delivering coal myself.
Right. Yeah.
And I, in those days, we didn't even have wheelbarrows. We had sacks, and you had to shovel the coal into sacks, put them up on your shoulder, carrying it down the sidewalk to the coal chute, and pour it in through the coal chute. So hopefully, if we get a new president, we can get rid of coal, and I won't have to do that job.
Well, let me ask you, Bruce, because, I mean, you obviously, came from the working class, and you ended up breaking out of that, but I want you to tell us, I had read a story online, and you can tell me if it's true or not, but your kind of first foray in breaking into being considered or considering yourself an actor involved a gorilla suit?
Well, yeah, but I got to tell you, I had an instinct for acting, and I didn't know what it was. So in our tough working-class neighborhood, if you said you were an actor, that was like I'm going to be a girl and wear skirts. You just didn't allow that. I had an instinct for it. I remember my dear mother, used to read Little Women to me and take me to movie theaters, which my father forbade because it was against the religion to be in a movie theater. But I was infatuated with movies. But I remember seeing a newsreel with FDR struggling to get to a microphone with his polio.
Right.
And I remember showing my mother stuff that I saw at the movie theater with her sometimes, and I showed her FDR. And what I showed her was I put my body into a polio body. And in a sense, then I was able to walk. And I remember my mother looking at me with astonishment. She was, "Do you love your president?" Yeah, I guess so. But what I was interested in was what is happening with that person.
Right.
And that's what acting should be about, instead of the dumb things that people are taught by dumb teachers who failed at acting themselves. And the majority of people who teach the same dumb stuff that caused them to be failures.
Right.
And so I teach very different things. But what I'm saying is, acting should be an exploration of the experience. So if I title what I teach, it would be called experiential acting. If you're not having an experience, you're not doing anything interesting. And that goes for art, too, because I am also a painter, and I'm working on my art book right now.
Fantastic.
But I took a long journey towards being an actor, so you just didn't do it. But I had an instinct for it, and I remember like being in a church group and being put on in a play up at the front of the church, in a small church, and it was Joseph and Mary going from door to door trying to find a place so that they could give birth in shelter to Jesus. And they went from one person to another, and I was the youngest person on the thing, and I was only like 3 years old. And they got to me, and my one line was, "No room at the inn." And I was just a little barrel-chested kid, and I burst out with, "No room at the inn."
You wanted to be heard. You didn't need a microphone. There you go.
The whole church burst into laughter, so I thought, so I did it again, and I did it again, and finally the minister was chasing me around the altar as I kept repeating that line, and it was carried down the aisle and locked down in the basement because I was still yelling, "No room at the inn." So the acting thing, I enjoyed it. Now, becoming an actor, like I said, was only the fruity boys were allowed to be actors.
Right.
Not that I dislike fruity boys. I have many friends who are fruity boys.
Well, it wasn't such a fruity job getting to throw the stripper around as the gorilla. I mean, is that literally what you did? You had to pick her up, throw her around?
Well, let's get to that in a little bit.
Okay.
I'll tease you a little bit. Let you wait to see if that story is true.
Okay.
Well, I like your philosophy of acting because I noticed when we moved out here, there's so many con artists out here that sell acting classes or the headshot scam and everything, and you know, and you really got to watch that, don't you?
Well, the headshot thing is one of the worst things because you don't need to get somebody to take your headshot. Take your iPhone or get a friend with an iPhone and take your shots and make jokes while you're taking it, so you'll have expressions where there's thoughts going on in your head instead of this frozen statue that appears on technically pure photography. Forget pure.
Yeah.
Pure
Right.
is boring. And art shouldn't be pure. Art isn't about not making mistakes. Art, sometimes the mistake is the best thing you did.
Right.
And you don't realize that right away. But I have a very strong, different kind of a thing. But I, as a kid, had problems with school, and because I flunked English my first year of class, and I didn't know, they hadn't taught me how to read. But I would say the lines that I heard somebody else read while looking at the pictures. So I was able to memorize that. And they had me tested and found out I had a really high IQ, but I didn't know. I thought I was always stupid. And I was actually very, very bright. And I didn't realize I was very, very bright until I was in, sixth grade, and the teacher brought us into the school library, and she said, "All right, all the class can go to wall 1, 2, and 3, and Bruce and Irene," or maybe it was Tiffany, who knows, "Bruce and Tiffany can go to wall 4, which were all the college-level books." And I immediately went there and took out Homer's The Iliad and the Odyssey. And but at that moment when the teacher said that, I suddenly realized, wait a minute, I'm not the dumb one, I'm the smart one.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And for years, it was still there. There was a kind of brain that I have that people didn't even know existed. And I played football. I was given a scholarship offer to Colorado College, but they wouldn't let me in until I went to a college because they seen a grade that I'd flunked in, probably was math or something like that. And then I went to a junior college in Chicago and played 2 years there and played semi-pro football on Sundays. Now, this is way before acting happened, but I remember like doing wrestling contests, and I worked in a carnival in a wrestling sequence where I would challenge a guy from the audience, and it was kind of like acting, but I didn't know I was. But I still had the D's, Dems, and Does accent. So I played for 2 years and semi-pro and all, and suddenly, and I took that test to stay out of being drafted for the Korean War, and I passed the test, but then I flunked English. And I flunked English 3 times in a row, and that got me drafted for the Korean War. Now, the Korean War, I was there the last 6 months of the actual shooting part of the war, and it was an interesting experience. The Koreans are terrific people, and I learned a lot. But when the war stopped, University of California started sending teachers over to Seoul, Korea, to give courses. So I picked up 9 hours of college credits when I was in Seoul, Korea. And one of the courses I figured I better take was English.
There you go. You had a reason now.
That got me drafted over there. And I took the course, and at the end of the course, the teacher, very kind, University of California teacher, pulled me aside and said, "Bruce, I don't know what it is about you, but there's something strange." He said, "By going by your grammar scores and all that, I should flunk you again. But you write beautifully." He had given out writing assignments, and I'd written 3 short stories, which he felt were. He said, "You have really great talent," and I'd read a lot of them, so I didn't have to learn. Just read good stuff. You like to be a good artist, look at good art. You want to see good actors, look at good actors. You want to be good at something, look at somebody who's good at them and appreciate what they're doing. Don't try to imitate what they're doing, just appreciate them. So he said, "I don't know what it is about you, but there's something strange in your brain, and you do things, but I'm going to pass you just to get this over with." Well, at that point, nobody knew what it was. What was wrong with my brain was this: I'm dyslexic.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So dyslexia, and my theory of dyslexia is, there's dumb dyslexic and smart dyslexic.
We have talked to so many actors that were dyslexic. It seems to go hand in hand, yeah.
Which actors were dyslexic that you talked to?
Well, John Mallory Asher from Weird Science, son of William Asher, was one.
Yeah, there's been quite a few. I don't even remember all of them.
Right. Well, here it is with me, and I went on and got a master science of I got a science bachelor of science in speech with a minor in psychology, and I wanted to study psychology anyway because everyone I knew in my life was crazy. So I wanted to. And I guess in a certain way I was crazy, but I knew how to use it. And, like I knew how to, I was a pretty good fighter, so I didn't have to keep pushing my ankles down, my stuff down to my ankles to look like a tough guy. But I still had the D's, Dems, and Does accent.
Let me ask you this, as an actor and as a father, because I had an opportunity to talk to Bruce Dern. And I talked to him about how things were different when he was an actor compared to Laura Dern when she was growing up. How did this relate with your son? I mean, you had it rough, but I assume he had it a little easier growing up. And how did that come into play?
Well, one of the things that I did as an actor, Laura is terrific, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
She and Crispin work together, and Bruce Dern is a terrific actor and guy, and I've enjoyed my meetings with him a few times at events, which are over with now until the COVID goes away. So Laura, is a very bright and very beautiful woman, and very sweet, and the times I've been at events and talked to her. It's always been a great pleasure, and she always sends a great congratulations to Crispin. But one of the things that with the dyslexic is, I believe dyslexia for me was, don't find out how to do it, just do it.
Yeah.
Right.
If you have an instinct for something, the danger for most people is they don't find their instinct. And they end up doing something that they're supposed to do because Mommy and Daddy chose it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And there you are with Crispin. Crispin's terrific mother, my dear wife, who we had a 56-plus year marriage, and I lost her 4 years ago.
Sorry.
Both Crispin and I miss her terrifically. But she took him to schools very early. She took him to Montessori when he was young, and she eventually got him to the Montessori school, and she which was, you had to take gifted program test that you had to be in it. So he was in a gifted school program. But at one point when he had finished junior high, basically, he'd had one summer where he went to a regular junior high thing during a summer course. And I thought it was time for him to get out of the elite thing and realize that there was a world out there which was dangerous. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I always did with Crispin was I started talking to him before he was born. I used to put my mouth on my wife's tum-tum and talk to him, say, "Hi, this is your daddy. I can't wait to..." And I think everyone should do that.
Yes.
If you have a baby on the way, talk to the baby now, so the baby won't be so confused when it comes out and look around and go, "Where the hell am I?"
I didn't do that, but like the other host here is my daughter, and I never talked to her baby talk. You know how parents always talk to their kids baby talk? I never did that.
No. Well, I only talk to him baby talk now, because he's the boss. He thinks he knows more than me now. No, he's true. But no, I used to talk to him, and I used to say, I would walk up and down Broadway and point at signs and things, and I'd say, "What do you think that is? What do you think that is?" And I used to take him to the park and watch how brave he was. He would stride along Riverside Park. We were on the Upper West Side by the time he was born, when I was still on the Lower East Side in New York. And the New York thing is a whole different phase of life. Now, so, Bruce probably was, he's lucky. His daughter is smart. Crispin was smart. But one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to put Crispin in situations which he could just be challenged by. And one of the things I decided, he should get into sports a little bit. And I knew that he wasn't like a football type like me. But I knew that he could handle... So I put him into soccer. There was AYSO, soccer. Mm-hmm. And I put him into soccer, and he was playing on these kids' teams. And eventually, that worked out for me because a couple dudes, one was an English dude and the other guy was Scottish, and said, "Well, we're on a soccer team, and we'd like you to be on it." And I went, "Well, I've never played soccer." "No, but you look strong. You look like I could do it." So they put together this terrible team, and I played on it. And the team was put into a league and was kicked out immediately. It was supposed to get 2 games with everything. It was kicked out after just 1. But I had fallen in love with soccer, and I used to go. I live across the street from a park, Mar Vista Playground, a rec park, and the Argentinians classic team used to come over there and practice even when the Olympics were going on. But there were Argentinians and Mexicans and lots of South Americans playing every Saturday from 8 in the morning to 8 at night, as long as there was light, and there could be as many as 100 people on each side, and each person that would arrive, they say, "Okay, you're on that team, and we're, whatever." And I remember standing on the side there watching them, and some guy looked over at me, and he gave me my first nickname in that soccer room. He says, "Hey, movie."
Oh, wow.
"You want to play?" I said, "Yeah." So I went and played, and I played with them for quite a while. But movie meaning that he had probably never seen any of my movies. He'd probably only seen television shows like Chips. I saw you in Chips.
Now, I've got to ask you, okay, there's many actors that came out of Chicago and the area. I mean, Jodie Foster, came from my town. I was born in Rockford, Illinois. But how did you get from Chicago to Hollywood and into the film industry?
Well, okay, here we go. So before I went to Korea, I used to work out with weights for my athletic stuff, and I even worked out with one guy who was a Mr. America. And somebody said, you got a good. One of my buddies said, "Hey, you got a good build on. You ought to go down there and pose at the Art Institute." He and I had been doing art projects in my yard and stuff like that. So I went down to pose at the Art Institute in Chicago. And I was posing. There was a beautiful naked woman posing across the room, and we wore jockstraps, so we didn't have to expose all of our inadequacies.
Oh my!
The women were delightfully naked, and I remember seeing this girl, and she came to me at the break with her bathrobe on now, and darn it, and then she said, "Bruce, how would you like to..." And then she kind of rolled her eyes at me, and my mind was going because I'd seen her naked. And I was thinking, like to. And she said, "Be a gorilla."
And all your dreams were dashed because you were hoping for more, and come to find out you were offered bananas.
Well, I thought, what the hell is this? Some kind of new sex ritual or what? And it turned out that she was a stripper.
Oh.
And the guy who had been the gorilla part of the act, it was a fairly famous gorilla act that had been in the Chicago World's Fair. And the guy who ran the act was also an agent for other strippers and owned this act. And I went in to meet him. He says, "Yeah, you should do this act and go down to the Lincoln Park Zoo and meet Bushman." And so I went down to Lincoln Park Zoo, which had a gorilla house, and they had chimpanzees and other gorillas, and I think they had one orangutan. And then there was Bushman down at the end. He had a double cage, and he was huge. He was like 500 pounds. And I walked down there, and the people who had been there had disappeared, and suddenly I was the only person that was standing in front of a gorilla, this famous gorilla, and he looked at me, and then he said, "Bruce, don't tell anyone I can talk." And I said, "Okay, Bushman." He said, "Now, you're going to be a gorilla. Here's what you got to do. Think my thoughts." I went, "Okay, Bushman." Then he said, "Do my moves." I said, "Okay, Bushman." He said, "That's your lesson. Get out." I said, "Okay, Bushman." So I went back and we rehearsed the act, and it was, it was like 15 minutes of the girl coming out and stripping, and me coming out and scaring the audience, and then me chasing the girl, and then her scaring me off, and then me hiding and catching my breath behind there, and then her dancing, and then finally me catching her on an altar, and she commits suicide after I've raped her, and then I carry her off, and that was it. So
you can't see shows like that anymore. It's sad. That's entertainment.
Well, it was. I don't know that. I think it's coming back, frankly.
Oh, okay.
I think there's some burlesque coming back, and there's some big acts with women jumping out of cakes and things like that, which is. But we went down to Florida, Tampa Bay, Florida, and we had 8-week job down there, and it was a good pile of money, much more than the $6 I made a week on the newsstand,
Right.
and more than I made in the glass factory. I worked in a glass factory for 2 years, too, went from 14, 15, and there I was ladling hot glass. But here I am in the ape suit, and the clubs in those days were more like burlesque in a way. They would have a stand-up comedian, and the strippers were kind of very classy, and they but there were girls would go around and get people to buy drinks and stuff like that. But so there was this magician. He was a magician act in the club as part of the entertainment, and he pulled me aside in front of a bunch of people in the dressing room, and he said, "Bruce." And he took out his magic wand, and he tapped me on each shoulder and on the forehead. He said, "You are an actor."
Wow. And that was it.
I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You make that gorilla so believable, you ought to try acting." I
Right.
said, "Really?" And then there was this big guy who was a singer in a nightclub. Again, quite a varied entertainment, strippers and kind of burlesque-like, and magicians, and this singer, and this big, tall, handsome guy, who I got to know for years, said, "Yeah, you ought to go to New York and take acting classes." I went, "Acting classes?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "There are classes in acting?" He said, "Yeah, you take acting classes." I went, "Oh, okay." I still don't believe in acting classes, even though I teach in a sense. What I teach is a therapist rather than as a teacher like most of these teachers. But so I then got drafted for the Korean War, and the whole time I was there, I was, lucky to never get shot or killed, and survived it, and got my English score and passed English, and I could go back to Chicago, and then maybe I could get my scholarship at Colorado College, which also had a good art school. And I liked the idea of going there. And I went back, but I went back to the college where I played football for to pick up some more classes while I put out my feelers for getting a scholarship again. And then I was there, and I saw on a notice that there was auditions for a play. And I thought, maybe I should see if that magician was right and go try out for that play.
Right.
Just on that recommendation.
And so I went down there and read, and the teacher, who was the director of this play, was Camino Real, Tennessee Williams play, who I later did his Broadway show and got to know him pretty well. But so my first play was Camino Real. Now, I didn't know I was going to get to play. I just read, and then the teacher said, "Okay, come back to the callback Saturday." And I went, "Okay," and I didn't go back. Maybe it was some kind of sudden fear. I found some other way of being busy with something else. I was setting up more posing classes at the Art Institute so I could make money for my college, and I had the GI Bill, but whatever. The more money you could bring in, and eventually. And I didn't go back. And I'm walking down the hall and up a flight of stairs, and I see this teacher running at me, and he says, "Where were you?" I go, "Where?" He said, "You didn't come back to the callback." I said, "No, I got a little busy." He says, I want you to play the lead."
Wow.
And I went, "Oh."
Yeah. And the magician was right.
And there was Kilroy in Camino Real, which had a lot of variety to it. It was humorous. I danced in it. I had a girlfriend that was a dancer and taught me some steps and all that stuff. And I was doing the play, and then somebody said, "You ought to do community theater," and I did some community theater. I sang in a Wagnerian opera, and I did Arthur Miller and other plays in community theater, and it was the most the actors in those community theaters were the most pompous actors I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And then
very self-important, like, oh my God. But then somebody told me about a summer stock company up in Wisconsin, up a little branch off of Lake Geneva, and it was an old Mormon church. And they said, go on up there, and they hire 3 actors. And I wrote them a letter, and they'd already hired the 3 actors, but they had open casting. So I went up there for open casting. I drove up in my car, and I got the lead in the first play, and I had a lead in every other play, and I had very little money. And I basically lived out of my car and slept on the porch of the theater.
Wow. You definitely fought the hard road, that's for sure. But you certainly got there. I mean, I think a lot of your upbringing in Chicago and being the tough kid, or having to at least act like the tough kid, caused you to get a lot of roles like that. I know you're really famous for your role in Diamonds Are Forever as Mr. Wint, and James Bond is a big thing here. Can you talk about how you got into that movie and what that experience was like? I guess that was Sean Connery, right?
Oh yeah, great, yeah. It's a wide spread of things, I mean, getting into that, and I'll get to that about
sure.
How it happened, and that wasn't a tough guy, by the way. It was 2 males who were basically married. So that was a very, very audacious and daring thing for the time that was out.
Right.
That these 2 gay guys were the murderers in the thing, and very clever. But so anyway, I decided during that summer, like, the hell with football, this is it, I'm going to be an actor. So I flushed the idea of being a football player, and I went to Northwestern University. And by the time I got to Northwestern, I'd already done more plays than anyone who was taking classes there. So I knew more about the actuality of doing a play. So you would do a new play every week, and you would get, basically 5 days to get ready to perform a play. And that, to me, is like one of the greatest experiences of my life. I did over 100 summer stock plays.
Yeah.
And I did Broadway, and I did off-Broadway, and I did touring, and I did all of that. That's one of the advantages that most actors don't get today, where they can do a lot of theater.
Absolutely, that's true, very true, yeah.
And most of the people who do theater now are so bad at that they teach them how to be theatrical instead of a real human being. Now, when I did a play, I could go 1 week and be an 18-year-old, next week be a 60-year-old, 1 week be a smart guy, 1 week a dumb guy, 1 week a funny guy. And so that's why the variety, if you look at my roles and you look at my demo, you'll see that I've never done the same character twice. I mean, everyone's and I don't do myself. This is me right now, but I've never put this on screen.
I mean, it's a lot more fun being a character actor, I would assume, that you get to be so many different people.
Everyone should be called a character actor. I mean, all that thing is a way of diminishing it. You're not a star, you're just a character actor. Yeah. Well, in a way, it's kind of true, because they like to call you a character actor, but you're really maybe the fiber of the whole movie, because you're, those actors who are really real give, people that sometimes the star is just a star because they're gorgeous and great boobs or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's okay too. But whatever it takes to get there. But I did another year and 3/4 at Northwestern, and but I did another summer of stock after that, where I did repertory theater, and I just finally knew I had to go to New York, and that's a scary place to go to. But you have to jiggle around, go from place to place, and be brave. But I'll tell you one of the things that Northwestern did for me. Doing Shakespeare, you can't do speak the speech I pray you with. Speak the speech I pray you. is I pronounce it to you. You got to actually enunciate correctly. So I lost my D's, Dems, and Do's.
Yeah.
Accent. And the best thing about Northwestern was it went. One of the things that I did at Northwestern, I developed a reputation because I'd be in class and make comments, and I was starting to teach privates to people back then because they saw that I was telling them the truth. I in a way, I knew more about the reality of acting than a lot of the teachers there. Not that the teachers weren't loving and giving and helpful, but there was this one young guy came to me and he said, "Bruce, I heard about you, and I want you to come and see my freshman scene and give me your comments on it." I went, "Sure," and I went, and he was pretty good in the thing. And then I went up, and there was like a line of about 50 girls lined up to congratulate him. So I got up there front in the first, and because I knew that I couldn't wait till all these girls who wanted to take him to bed, because he was a gorgeous kid. And so I got up there and I said, "That was great, and thank you." And he said, "No, wait, hang by. Let me get rid of all these people." And again, all these people were girls who wanted him. And so we walked around the campus, and he said, "So how was I?" And I said, "You were pretty good here." And I said, "You could have done this and that, but you're fine." And he said, "Well, what should I do?" I said, "About what?" He said, "Should I stay at college or should I go to New York?" I said, "What do you want?" He says, "I want to be a star." Now, years later, when I told this story in front of this guy and one of his kids, he got mad at me by saying, "I didn't say I want to be a star." But he did say it back then. But at any rate, I got to New York about 6 months after he had gone to New York, because he took my advice. He went to New York. And I'm walking down Fifth Avenue, and I see the guy coming at me, and he gives me a big hug, a big, tall, gorgeous guy. And he says, "Bruce, you were right. I'm a star." I said, "That's great, Warren." It's Warren Beatty.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and he was terrific. And
it was surprising to me that Warren Beatty would ask advice from anyone. Didn't he have a pretty good ego?
Well, he was only 19 then. He
Well,
was still
we all start out humble, always.
Right.
He has a terrific ego, but he's a lovely guy, and his lovely, brilliant, talented wife. And he's great, and his wife is great. And so I bumped into each of them a few times at events and that kind of thing. But so Warren was looking for good advice, and I had somehow my reputation had been passed around the School of Speech, and what I do as a teacher is I see where you are, and I ask the question, "What do you want? What do you want? What do you want to do?" And that's kind of like a good psychologist approach, because I kind of approach teaching as a psychologist in a way. What do you want? What are you doing? And how is that preventing you from getting what you want?
Yeah.
Now, if you want this, here's some things you might do to get what you want. That's what I teach and how I teach. And if somebody wants to take online lessons, because I won't see anyone in person anymore, and I stopped having group classes and I started just doing privates, and even that I won't do anymore until this COVID is over. But I'll do online stuff, and I will give a 2-hour private online, spread over whatever amount of time it takes, for $150. So if somebody wants to be in contact with me, they have to call this number that I'm going to give you.
Okay.
And it's 310-398-2539. Now, if they leave a proper message, it sounds like they're not insane, because I get lots of insane calls. And they leave a good phone number where they don't pronounce the 2 or 3 the same way. but a clear, enunciated phone number. I will call them back and talk with them. And then when I decide that if they want to do it, I'll tell them how to get the money to me, and then I'll start working with them. And I'll give them short monologues and tell them how to work on it. But I'll tell them how to do self-photos, instead of all that other stuff. They spend a lot of stupid money. And then I will give them short monologues. Then they will shoot themselves on an iPhone or with a friend's iPhone and send it back to me to my post, to my Facebook, which I'll give them once we're involved, and I'll look at it and I'll tell them how terrible they were, or or I might, give them a few suggestions and stuff, and start moving them towards simple things. Look like a human being. Talk like a person talking to a person. That's the way you should do it. Don't take lessons with me. Just do what I just said.
Yeah. Now, have you ever had this situation, Bruce? Because we've talked to a lot of people who teach acting, and some of them are very credentialed and should be teaching acting, and then some of them are, like you said at the start of this interview, to where they're a failed actor, so that's what they're teaching because they couldn't. That's not the case with you. But
no,
have you ever?
You have credits. There's a lot of them don't even have any credits.
Have you ever had a situation, because everybody wants to be an actor. Everybody wants to come to California or go to New York, and everybody wants to be famous. But sometimes I'm sure people have it in them, and sometimes I'm sure maybe they don't. Have you ever had a situation to where you've told a student, maybe you should pursue something else? I mean, what do you do in that situation? What do you do, Bruce?
And has anybody you've ever told that you shouldn't be an actor wound up becoming famous? Because that's happened too.
No, I take every person as an individual, but I tell them about their logistics and their age and their physicality, and I test them. I see if they have a potential for comedy, or if they're able to be just a goon, or be a variety of things, and see if they have a strong thing. Then they can put together a demo that they can then post on Facebook or IMDb Pro, and they have to join IMDb Pro to post it, and then they can send out cards with one of their self-take photos and a little bit, if they've gotten any credits by now, but not to worry about, just to send out the notice to variety of agents. So they get a hold of Samuel French's The Agencies book and look at it to see what agencies. Now, I got a guy who's paid me money to give him some stuff, and the guy immediately contacted CAA, or before he met me, contacted CAA and William Morris, and he's got no credits whatsoever. Like, what the hell's wrong with you, man? Don't you realize that you've got to start somewhere?
Yes.
Where somebody's looking for somebody that looks like you or sounds like you, or if you have these kinds of looks or whatever. But I deal with reality, reality. If you don't deal with reality. So, yeah, if you should also be looking to make money at other things. Like if you're good with computers, learn that. If you're great with languages and want to be an interpreter, do that. If you want to go to law school, do that. But you can always maybe acting just becomes fun.
Right.
Something you do for fun. But not that I have never told a person they can't. I will tell them what the difficulties are and do it, but pursue it in a smart way. Don't pursue it in a dumb way where you're taking advantage of.
Right.
You know what we think acting coaches should teach? We've always complained to each other, my daughter and I here doing these shows, that a lot of now you're great. I'm not saying about you. You're great, but there's a lot of actors that come on the show that don't know how to fucking do an interview. And I think acting coaches should teach that, because there's a certain way you can handle yourself when you're on the air and the public's listening to you, and some of them don't care about how they come across.
Because they can't.
Yeah, no lie.
Yeah, no, look, there are there are egos and people who are in panic areas, and forgive them. They're trying, and so if they're really dangerous, shoot them and get rid of them.
It's so different now too, like you said, with the pandemic. I mean, I don't even know. Do you think Hollywood's ever going to get back to where it was in full swing again? It's so hard now.
I don't know. Maybe. Somebody just called me about doing a Bond convention a year from now, and I said maybe if there is a they would want me to come to Vegas and do one of those autograph things and all that, which I've done in England, and I've done it in Canada, and I've done it in the States and stuff like that. And it's fun, I enjoy meeting a lot of people, and I'm constantly studying people. That's my approach. So if I'm, watching FDR struggle to get to a microphone, I become FDR at 3 years of age, and that's how you act. Just like Bushman told me, think my thoughts, do my moves.
Well, you mentioned,
but don't. Bushman can talk, okay?
Right.
Keep that.
Absolutely.
No, we won't tell anybody.
I was wondering, because you mentioned Bond again, and you're just like a salt of the earth, somebody I could talk to forever. And you definitely had to have had some stories on the Bond set. Was there anything that happened between you and Sean Connery? Because I could just see you two getting together and ripping the town up or something. Because
well, that's your fantasy. No, reality is, look, when you are trying to become an actor, making enough money. I mean, I lived on the Lower East Side in New York and struggled to get this job or that job, but posed at art classes all the time. Even when I was going at Northwestern, I was still doing the 8 act at night in the 8 suit, and then I would finish like at 4 in the morning and just go to the School of Speech and take classes during the day and do Shakespeare, and then 8 o'clock at night I'd be back in where the hell was it? What's the name of that city? North of Chicago, almost in Indiana. Anyway, it would be, I would spend 6 days a week in my 8 suit while doing Shakespeare.
That was different.
I didn't let the ape ever become Shakespeare.
Well, let me ask you. You talked about how you critique actors, and I've got to ask your opinion, because we just recently rewatched the Walking Tall films, and you were in all 3 of them. The ones I call the legitimate ones. I don't call the one with The Rock legitimate. That to me wasn't a Walking Tall movie. But the ones that were first made, okay, the first one was Joe Don Baker, and then Bo Svensson. How do you compare Joe Don Baker and Bo Svensson in that same role, played by 2 different men? Compare them.
Well, not to insult Bo, he has acting talents, but he had a different script, a different writer, a different director, and different actors to work with. So whatever he did, I don't agree with the way it went, because I was when we did the first film, Joe Don Baker, who was terrific in the role and terrific to work with, Buford Pusser was there all the time.
Yeah. Right.
He was on set with us, and Buford and I became very strong friends. And I knew Buford. I knew what he was like, and I knew that his respect for women and his respect for law and his respect for the family was super important. But I don't know why Joe Don wasn't going to do the second film, but whatever reason, it was suggested that Buford might play himself in the second film.
Right.
And I did his screen test with him. And Buford, when he arrived, and again, we had become strong friends, jokes and stuff. We had lots of fun, and he was a big tease, and he was super macho guy in the best possible way, where it was a playful kind of thing. And but I remember he arrived on the set, and we'd already done the release of the the first Walking Tall, and the first Walking Tall was released at the big theater in Hollywood, and there was a big party at the big restaurant there, and then another party afterwards, and the audience was all deputy sheriffs, and they roared and loved the thing. And stupidly, some two guys from the foreign press approached me and said, we want to nominate you for Best Supporting Actor, so stay in touch with us. And I didn't. Mm-hmm. Stupid me, I should have, because I'm pretty damn good in that first film.
Yeah.
And it's damn good acting, and it's really a good part of the film. But Buford was there all the way through the film. We did the screen test. Now Buford arrived, and they had built at Paramount 3 full sets, and maybe 3.5 sets. And Buford arrives, and he's glad to see me, and he looks at me and he says, "Bruce, I'm scared to death."
Kind of different.
Yeah, and I said, "Yeah, that's a good place to start, Buford." And he said, "What am I going to do?" And then suddenly this old goofy type director, that's a guy who knows how to say, "Roll 'em, stop,
yeah,
cut." That's it. That's the ability of directing he had.
Yeah.
So he arrives, and before I get a chance to talk to Buford about doing the role, and he says, "All right, let's read through the scenes." And I'm playing the deputy scenes with him, and also playing a hijacker role that was later done by a black guy in the film. And so Buford and I read through it, and Buford is terrible.
Really?
Oh. And the director stands in front of us and wobbles from one foot to the other and goes, Suddenly he whirls on foot and spins away, yelling back over his shoulder, "Let me know when it's lighted!"
He was afraid to say too much because he probably had his big stick with him, so,
No, that big stick thing is the thing that went really wrong.
Really?
Yeah, definitely. Buford didn't use the big stick but once in his whole life. And that was not part of Buford. Buford was an entirely different kind of man. And that's where the movie went wrong. Well, anyway, Buford and I were left alone, and Buford looks at me and he says, "I was terrible, wasn't I?" I said, "Yep."
But you're a good sheriff. You're a good sheriff.
"What am I going to do?" I said, "Buford, listen to me now. When you were on patrol, you'd be in your car, and you'd be noticing, and you might be driving, and you notice a car that you thought you should check out. And you'd look at the license plate and call in the license plate to see if there was anything out on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you decided to stop the car, you'd turn your lights on and see how he reacted. And then when he stopped, you would pull over to the side a bit so your own car would block you from any oncoming traffic hitting you. And you would approach the back of his car, looking through the back windows, see if there was anyone back there. You'd look over his shoulder to see if there was anyone in the driver's seat. You'd look over his shoulder to see if you could see any weapons. And then when you got him to get out of the car, you'd wash his hands. You'd talk to him and see how he answered you and see what he looked like when he responded. He says, "Yeah, I do all those things." I said, "Well, that's how you act." He went, "Oh, okay." And that's an acting lesson right there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's unfortunately, it never happened, like they portrayed in the next movie, that he was in so-called...
Wait a minute. It did happen. He was great in the stuff that we shot. And he was going to be terrific.
Yeah.
So what happened?
What happened was the accident. That's what I was getting at.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't an accident. It was a murder.
There we go.
That's what I wanted to hear.
We were trying to get
we don't. In no way do we believe it was an accident. No, it was not an accident.
No, his daughter told me and described the thing. I mean, when I would be having lunch with Buford, I remember one time we're with this very cute girl with him, and Buford was wearing very tight clothing, and I said, Buford, I know that you're under threat and that anyone could come at you anyway. I'm trying to look at you and see where the hell your gun is.
Mm-hmm.
He says, oh, it's right here. I said, where? And he reached down and tapped her purse. His gun was in his purse. But Buford was even when he came to L.A., he had to, everyone had to be let know that he was under threat.
Yeah.
And so when after the tragedy of his death, I was very upset. And, I still will always be. Buford would have been terrific in the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Joe Don was terrific in the first one. Buford would have been terrific in the thing.
Were you ever worried about being threatened or whatever? Because you guys, part of it, telling the story.
Well, I don't know. I know when I'm in danger.
Yeah.
And I know that when Crispin was a little kid, my wife and I was still the struggling actor trying to pay my huge $99 a month mortgage and $99 a month mortgage. I still own that house, and I rent. If you don't have property, get some. If you can't afford a house, start buying graveyard plots. They go up in value too.
That's true.
That is
yes.
true. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I remember we used to we were tight on money, and we would look for events to go through. And I remember there was a Will Geer, terrific old time actor, was starting his Shakespeare thing out in the hills over there, and so we were going to go to that with Shakespeare reading, and we got there, and I parked my old Volkswagen, and Betty had gotten out with Crispin, and when I turned around, she was gone, and Crispin was standing alone right next to this guy, almost leaning on his leg. And the guy was gesticulating and making all kinds of moves and stuff, and and there were three guys sitting on a picnic bench, broken down picnic bench, like 3-4 guys actually, yelling, "That a way to go, Charlie! That a way to go, Charlie!" And he's waving his arms, and I knew I had to go and get my kid. But one of the things you do if you're in a gang situation, I realized it was a gang immediately, that you don't make eye contact. So I slid over this guy, Charlie, and I slid my arm down and scooped up Crispin, who was like 3 years old maybe, and then moved away from him, and Charlie threw himself back on a pile of garbage, started rolling around on it, and everyone was laughing and stuff because I looked to see did I just start a switch here? Would I, so I was just checking out of the corner. I didn't look, but I checked, so I went, okay, this is fine. I'll go past this and go down these stairs to the theater where the readings would be, and about 8 more guys come up the stairs. Again, part of this same mob of guys, and again you avert your eyes and you get past them. You make no contact with them. Then I got down to the bottom and looked up and I said to my wife, "Didn't you see those guys?" She said, "What guys?" And I went, "Oh my God," because the hippies were around then, and it was, who the Charlie was, don't you? Charlie Manson.
Oh
really?
My! Oh my! Wow!
Charlie Manson. And he was there, and Crispin was leaning against his leg.
Oh my God!
And Charlie was charming. I could see how charming he was, and how people were enjoying him, and all that stuff. But I looked up to see if any of those guys. I had couple other Manson events, but that was the change. It was the end of the hippies. Were kind of adorable.
Well, I'm glad that turned out okay. Wow.
Well, I'm a guy who deals with reality.
Yeah.
So when you asked if I was ever worried about Buford, enemies coming at me and telling the story, it doesn't matter. They didn't. It didn't carry that far, and there were lots of politicians and stuff like that around.
Well,
what happened? Second film was, I remember, Dwana told me, and I knew Dwana, the real Buford daughter, and she told me about his death and how it was a truck had swerved and shoved him off the road, and she arrived with his turned over car and the two truck drivers standing there looking at him underneath the car, and she said, "Help me get him out." And I said, "Not on your life, lady." And she pulled Buford out herself and held him with his head in her lap, and he looked up at her and said her name, Dwana, 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 and died. And then she looked on the road and could see where the tires were and how it had caused Buford's car to be turned over.
I can't believe it. This has never been solved. I mean, everybody just thought it was an accident, left it alone, and it remains unsolved. No,
they didn't want to solve it. They wanted to get away from it.
Oh, that's
they
incredible.
just wanted to pass it off.
I got to ask you a lighthearted question. We check IMDb, and sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. Did you have an uncredited role in Frankenstein Meets a Space Monster?
Well, I have a credited role in that. I played a guy with pointy ears, and damn it, pointy ears cause you go bald, so I was bald. I was a pointy-eared bald guy, but I also doubled into the ape suit, or it was kind of the monster suit, so I was used to being in suits. There was somebody else that did it too, but they needed me to do it one or two times.
Yeah, James.
It was just one of those New York events where you get a 5-day job, and you pay your rent for 5 weeks, or 5 months.
Some people think it was a bad movie, but it had people like James Cameron in it, right? Yeah.
It was a bad movie, but so what?
Well, you've certainly done the big films, too. It had to be fun working with Jack Nicholson in Chinatown.
Very much. Jack was great. Polanski was great, too. Polanski and I used to play chess together, and Jack used to give it our games. And, I had the way to all of these films goes up a strange kind of thing. You never know how lucky you can be. As a tough actor back in those days, you had to go and push yourself into offices. I would go into offices and leave my pictures and try to get interviews and meet casting directors. And I was with William Morris, but I finally had to leave William Morris and go to a smaller agency because William Morris was waiting for the big kill. I needed small kills to keep alive.
Right.
So I went with a smaller agency just to get jobs, and I did lots of films. I've done, well over 100 films and over 100 plays, and probably close to 100 television shows. And you just, again, the working class mentality. You have to make money, and so eventually somebody at William Morris asked me to come back, but I didn't go back. And in fact, I haven't had an agent for 20 years now. People just kept contacting me and finding me without an agent because I got tired of agency sending me for parts that I didn't want to do, and then getting parts of the money that I did want to do that I'd really gotten on my own. So anyway, maybe I want an agent again, though.
Never know.
An agent, I might be ready again. But I'm always a person with lots of projects. I might be writing a book on acting. I might be writing I've got a couple screenplays that I've written. I've got one that'd be animated, and I've got a script. I'm a very creative guy because it's part of being alive is working on something. If you're not working on a thing,
I work with my daughter here on the show, and I've got to find out, because, we were talking a little bit about your son, Crispin, who I am a major fan of. I want to thank you for having sex and bringing Crispin into the world, by the way. I told everybody I would jokingly say that. But what's it like working for Crispin?
How dare you talk about my sex life, man?
You produce some great things, including Crispin Glover. But I want to find out, okay, you were in 2 of his films, one that I guess is still not released, but I saw the one which is more of like an art film type, I guess you could describe. But what's it like with Crispin at the directing helm, and it's Crispin's film, and you're working for your son? What's that like?
Great. Yeah, he's a pro. He's smart. We would have some disagreements, but we'd work it out. It was fine. He wrote a script. I criticized it. He yelled it. His mother read the script. She criticized it. He didn't yell at her.
Oh. There you go.
She'd have beat the hell out of him.
Well,
he was way too tough.
I understand that you guys did a project that's still being worked on, right? Like, you guys started it like 6 years ago, right?
Yeah, we did it very swiftly. It only took us 6 years.
Well,
he shot it in the Czech Republic. Eventually the script, the criticism worked, and I was able to add things to the script. So I do have a minor script addition credit, and I basically play 4 characters in the thing, and 3 of them are the older version of 3 of Crispin's characters. Crispin, I always told Crispin about. If you want reality and you want safety, there's one very interesting thing which has real part of its name, real estate. And he owns a house in Silver Lake, which he Airbnb is out. He's got a girlfriend there who's still running the thing, even though Crispin's locked down in the Czech Republic right now, still working on our film. And I had to make dozens of trips to Europe. I also did a Polish film where I acted in Polish. Jak się masz, dupa? You know what I just said?
No, I have no idea.
Good. Yeah, I had to act in Polish, so I went to Warsaw like 6 times, and then I must have made 10 trips to the Czech Republic, because we shot it in sections. And
well, you're of Czech descent too, right? I mean, you've got that in your blood.
Well, my great-grandmother, my grandmother on my father's side was from Czech. My father was from English. My mother was Swedish, and from all Swedish blood. So I'm half Swedish, a quarter English, and a quarter Czech. And Crispin, when he was looking for a place, he has a place in Silver Lake. He was looking for a place in Europe and Spain and all of that, and then he found the Czech Republic, which was a good find because their tax ratio was good. He bought a 20-acre estate like over 15 years ago.
I looked it up to see what it looked like, and my God, it's beautiful. It's enormous.
Yes, it's gorgeous. And peacocks, and he doesn't have pictures there of the stables. There were 2 stables that we built sound stages in, and there's also another section with another kitchen, and the house itself that he lives in is, I guess it was originally 54-room mansion.
Well, obviously you paid him a very good allowance throughout the years.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, told me. Yeah, no, I told him, obviously he's made more money now in the business than I have, because back in my days they were cheap on actors.
Yeah, it's true. They didn't pay as much, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't care, I'm fine. I'm pretty smart about money, and I don't need to work ever again if I don't want to.
Yeah, well, that's great.
I'll work if somebody comes up. There are a couple of people that say I'm going to be in their film, but I haven't seen any contracts yet or any reason to work. I would work in a film if it's a really good part. I won't work if it's just junk.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, I want to throw a plug in for my friend Steve Carver, who has a great book out.
Steve is great. I wish Steve would go back to directing. I'd work with him no matter what.
You know, check him out because they've got a little Western they're wanting to make.
They what?
They've got a Western. Steve is working on a Western he's trying to get out. Or at least working
Where
on.
they want to make it. I don't know if they've shot anything or how far they are, but he's wanting to do a Western film.
Well, yeah, I guess, that'd be fine. Forget Westerns. They're old. Who needs another Western, for God's sake?
They kind of come back for a while, then they go away.
Yeah.
But how much fun was it doing the photo shoot? First of all, who's that lovely lady that's in the photo with you?
From Western Portraits, from Steve's book.
Which photo?
There was a photo that you did for Steve's book, Western Portraits, where you're kind of like in a saloon outfit and you have a lovely saloon girl kind of sitting at your feet.
Sitting at my feet? Oh, oh, yeah, that was Steve Carver's photo. Yeah, okay. Yeah, she was just somebody that, when he was going to do, Steve approached me and wanted to put me in the Western, because I've done quite a few Westerns, and but it's not the main thing I've done. A lot of people think that, they read that book and they think that's all I've done. No. I've done 80 other things that weren't Western.
Right.
But Steve offered, and he sent me some examples of stuff, and there were all these rough-looking cowboys, and I said, Steve, what I want to do is I want to be a successful owner of a saloon, and I want two pretty women hanging on my shoulder.
Perfect.
So I contacted two pretty women that were students of mine, and neither of them were willing or had the space or time to do it. And finally, Steve came up with that woman at my feet, and then I came up with another woman who was actually a guy who had worked on Crispin's films, and a lot of times when we were working in Czech Republic on one of the stages, I'd look over and see this long-haired woman over there, and then he turned, and I realized it was this guy. And I thought, well, let's put him in the photo, and we'll just photo him from the rear, because from a corner. So there were some photos that Steve took of my pal with his mustache hidden by his hair hanging down. But anyway, he was not in the final photo.
I was going to say, I never saw that one. Okay, that's...
No, Steve pretends that he didn't do it. So.
but you look very good in the photo, and yeah, I would like to have her at my feet too. She was nice looking.
He was what?
She was nice looking. I wouldn't mind having her at my feet.
Well, I offered her to, I suggest that she should try out acting because she was good looking, but she totally turned me down. I went, oh, bullshit.
Well, before we go, last thing we wanted to talk about was, can you tell us anything about the art book that you're working on? I mean, how far along are you, or is it kind of one of those things where it's a living, breathing project, so who knows how long it'll take?
Well, I've got 100 photos of drawings and things like that. I will continue painting. I've sold paintings for as much as, well, I won't tell the price because then the IRS will catch me.
Yes, don't do that.
Don't do that.
But I've sold paintings over the years, but I don't want to sell now until after I get a book out, and then I want to get the book out. I've got to get my computer fixed. I've got to get a different computer. Crispin may publish it for me. Did you say you were into publishing?
Well, not really. We write for a national magazine, but we don't publish our own books. I know somebody that does publish books I can get you in touch with.
Right. Well,
I think you're better off to go. You're better off to go with your son, though.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. We'll do it in China, and once I've got it, then I want to get a somebody who distributes paintings, and then I want to start selling my paintings for what they're worth, like $200,000 a piece, instead of the measly prices that I've gotten in the past. So, I can do 12. I did one 12-foot long painting. I've got a bunch of 12-foot long canvases.
Wow.
And I will do them. So if somebody out there wants me to do a 12-foot long canvas for them, tell them to get in contact with me, and I'll give them a fairly awful price.
And casting directors can contact you unless it's a Western, because you don't want to do a Western, right?
No, I love horses. They're fun. I mean, I love doing Western. I mean, look, you take Western. What are Westerns? You take the dumbest animal in the world, you put them on top of the second dumbest animal, and the second dumbest animal is hurting the third dumbest animal. So I'm willing to be the dumbest animal on the planet, riding on top of that lovely smart horse.
All right, well...
No, I liked it.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we get back into making films and doing things, and this stupid pandemic ever gets over with. It's all according to how the election turns out, I guess.
Well, if we don't get rid of the guy, I think I'm going to move back to Sweden. I don't know.
Or
if we don't get rid of the guy, I say that we all move to the Czech Republic and just go back over there.
There you go. Maybe. Czechs seem to be fairly smart about it all.
Right.
But I hope there will be enough undumb people who will vote that creep out, because he's a criminal, total criminal. I mean, and the disgusting stuff and lack of respect for women. A Bo Buford fan told me that he's going to vote for Trump, Putin, and I said, Bo Buford would have killed that Trump. He would have beat the crap out of him, not only for what he says, but the way he's treated women.
Right.
Buford had a high respect for women. And like I said, we were one time at a lunch, and some drunk was wandering past and put his hand on the woman's shoulder that was sitting at the table with us to catch his balance, and didn't notice that Buford started to rise up to go after him, and the woman reached up and said, "No, Buford, no, it's okay." Buford would have whipped him just for touching her shoulder.
Right. Yeah.
And that was the kind of guy Buford was. He was a protector of
the
women.
Real deal.
And, of real things in real life. So, and...
well, the thing about Trump that really bothered me is when he made fun of the reporter that had disabilities. Now, I know your son took somebody with disabilities and gave him a starring role in a movie, and Crispin really respects people with disabilities. I don't think that went too well with your son when Trump did that either, I doubt.
As do I. Those people were fun to be with. I had good times with them. I was around the set. I have a credit as a gravedigger.
Yeah. Well, there's always that. I wouldn't suggest you go back to that. That's pretty hard work, but...
Well, one last time, but I want to give my phone number again.
Yes.
Absolutely.
If anyone really wants to find out anything about my art, but they have to leave a solid message. It's 310 310-398-2539. I forget that I've got another phone number that I use, but I've got to get my iPhone working again, and I've got to get a new computer so I can finish my art book.
And you're on Facebook now. I'm waiting for you to accept my friend request. You didn't accept it yet. You need to accept it.
What's that?
On Facebook.
Yeah.
I have about 1,000 requests there, so I don't get to all. And I usually try to get to them and see who they are.
Yeah.
Because I have space for maybe another 700 people or 500 people. But, some people I would have to start erasing in order to let them in.
Well, you got to let me in, Bruce. I know your son.
Oh, aren't you a Facebook friend?
We're not yet. We sent you a request, but we're not. I don't think we're approved yet.
Yeah, we're waiting till you get
really?
to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Send it again, and I'll know what the hell who I'm letting in.
Okay.
Right.
But yeah, you can look at my Facebook and see. You can see some artwork, and you can see lots of stuff that I say about acting and about politics right now a lot.
Yes.
About thieves and monsters and how, please, people, if you haven't voted yet, go out there and get the criminal out. If you're a Republican, save your party. He's now holding the Republican Party prisoner. He will creep out. The Republican Party, there were great Republicans. Lincoln was a Republican.
Right.
Teddy Roosevelt was a Republican. There could be good Republicans in the future, but not if that creep is in control of you. He's got you all enslaved.
Well, it's we had John Savage on, actor John Savage, and he's a Republican, and he said Trump does not represent the Republican Party for him.
Yeah, he said, don't hold that against me.
Yeah, John is a pal. You know, I know him.
Yeah.
We enjoyed John, and his lady that lives with him. I don't know if they're married. She used to take acting lessons with me. She's a lovely, sweet. And, but John is terrific, a terrific actor, and he's. You know, my father was a Republican. My wife was registered as a Republican, but I always managed to get her to vote the way I wanted her to vote.
So you think you'll ever get to do the acting class in person again?
I don't know. I could do conventions. I could do a convention with. I've done them before with 100 people, where I do classes of 100 people, and it's called Saying Your Name.
Yeah.
And I would have people in the audience say their name, and then I might bring some of them up on stage. So I can give a lecture that would be 2 hours long, but people would have to offer me a substantial amount of money, and then I could do autograph signing afterwards.
Yeah.
Right.
But not until COVID is done and buried, and we don't have COVID 20 and 21 coming.
That's true.
Well, you can't go there now, but you should show up. A friend of ours who was in the movies at one time did a lot of the beach party films. Her name is Bobby Shaw. She teaches acting too. They would love to have you show up and talk to the kids.
Well, was she successful as an actor?
In a roundabout way. She did 5 or 6 beach party films, and she's acted with David Carradine and people like that. She didn't really pursue it after the 60s, so.
Yeah. Well, you know, look, everyone has their level, and they can reach a certain level, and unfortunately, there are these big disciplines. Like I studied psychology a lot, and I don't agree with the method. I don't agree. The method is limiting. It's making you, there are great people who give the method credit, but it's because of their own talent. It wasn't the method that made them good. It was the fact that they went on to their own instincts. Mm-hmm. So if you go with your own instincts, you're going to be good. And that's where, I didn't push my acting at Crispin. I let him go to acting classes because, it was good for him socially to go to acting classes. I only would talk to him about acting when he asked me specifically about something. I remember, Nick Cage was his best buddy, and Nick used to be at our house all the time. Nick would ask me advice, but he would, I shouldn't say that. Nick will beat me up. No, I loved him. He was a great kid. Yeah. And, Chris Walken was, I did a play on Broadway that I was understudy from Robert Preston. Mm-hmm. I didn't have a part in the play, but I was there with the producers and directors, and I saw this young guy was Chris Walken, and I saw how talented he was, but I could see that the producer, director, and writer were thinking of firing him. Mm-hmm. So I pulled him aside, and I didn't teach him anything about acting. I just told him to stop worrying about these guys. And so we would meet after every scene that he did over in the side lobby, and I said, "Yeah, just meet and we'll talk a little bit." And then after about 2 weeks of that, he says, "I think I've got it. I think you do," and he did. And he's one guy I quote because he did say to Crispin when they worked on him, "Your dad helped me a great deal in my early days in New York." And
fantastic.
I was a friend of his, and he was a friend of mine. A terrific guy, married to a very beautiful woman, a much different person than any of you would know, and actually a tough dude. He was pretty tough. I backed him up one time when somebody crossed him one time, and he had the guy begging for mercy.
Right.
Well, I guess Crispin's got a new movie out. I can't think of the name. I don't know if you know it either, but I got to check that out.
Well, he's got some offers right now, but he's in that American Gods series. Of course.
Yeah, of course.
He has an interesting look on acting. He talks about how he gets very offbeat roles offered to him all the time, but he's never going to get to play like the leading man stuff, but that's okay, because he uses those movies to pay for what he does in his films, which is a great way of doing it. Yeah. That's a great way of doing it.
Well, he's done terrific work, and he's working on film, which is rare now.
Yes, it is.
At his estate in the Czech Republic, he got people working on it, and so he's still working on our film. Hopefully, it'll be done sometime before the pandemic is over with. As soon as the pandemic is over with, I hope it's ready.
Yeah. If I ever want an interesting interview, and we've had him on 3 times, all I have to do is mention the word censorship, and he goes off because he hates censorship.
Well, he's a tough dude, and he's a lovely, lovely guy, and women love him. In a certain way, there's a certain innocence about him still, and I still call him my boy. And he is. He's my boy, and I'm very proud.
Oh, there's no doubt about being your boy. You two look so much alike; it's incredible.
Yeah. Well, his mother had similar features to mine too.
Wow.
She was also a mixture of areas around Germany and that kind of area. So,
well, it's been great talking to you, and happy Halloween. And like you said, everybody needs to vote.
Hey, yes, both of you. Love you both. Pleasure anytime.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bruce. You have my phone number, so keep in touch. And once again, for our listeners, why don't you go ahead and give them the number again that they can call if they're interested in possibly taking an acting class with you.
310-398-2539.
Perfect.
And leave a clear message.
Yes. Thank you again so much, Bruce, for hanging out with us, and we will keep in touch. In the meantime, have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you, my dear.
All right.
Later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.